an honor to be here. It's kind of intimidating when you hear it all summarized like that. So many great and terrible things happen to me in this building. You don't know most of these people now, but when you walk into this building, even though it's changed a little bit since I got here, things you remember, so many great teachers that you guys don't know. Mrs. Johnson inspired so many of us in human anatomy class to be doctors, something I couldn't quite fulfill, but I tried. Mr. Moses mentored me in poetry. Miss Bolton drew out our very best in theater. When I was here, Mr. Seiler was just Todd. Little Todd. Sweet little Todd. Now I realize I should have been nicer to him because he would have assigned my books in his class. You could go back and see what's coming. This is one lesson you learn when you get older, is you're always saying to yourself, darn, I should have been nicer to that person. I should have been nicer to Jill Van Lokeren. She would have put me on Oprah. Things you learn too late. So I think the usual thing in speeches like this is to tell you how much potential you have and how you can go anywhere and you can do anything in your life. I am not going to do that today. I do believe that you can go anywhere and do anything. I wrote a book about that subject called The Genius in All of Us, as Dick mentioned. The book puts together a lot of cool science. I hope you read it. Maybe Todd will Mr. Seiler, will assign it. But the gist of that book is that there's a lot of wonderful science out in recent years that shows us that the idea of innate talent, that you're just born with this stuff and you can't really do anything about it, that's really a myth. And that really talent and intelligence are skills that you accrue over your life, starting from the moment that you're conceived and the moment you're born. But as I said, I'm not going to talk about that today. Instead, I brought two different speeches, and they're color-coded. I'm trying something different today. I brought a red speech and a blue speech, okay? The red speech, when I pick up the red speech, you're going to see it's red. And I gotta warn you, that's the boring speech. That's the thinky speech. That's the one where this old bald guy stands up there and tells you what he thinks is important. That's the speech that I feel like I have to give. The blue speech is the fun speech. That's why when you see blue, you're gonna say, yay. So let's practice that for just a second. The red speech, oh. Blue speech. All right. I was wondering if you guys would have some energy. All right, let's do this. All right. The red speech. Wait till you hear the title. Truth and Democracy and the Fate of the Planet Earth. You hate it already, right? Winston Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. I think every red speech should start off with Winston Churchill. In my career so far, what I've tried to give is clarity. Clarity. It's a super boring word, but a very important concept. I've tried my best to help people understand stuff. How the brain works, how DNA works, where talent comes from. What happens to our world when every human on Earth suddenly has a computer in their hand. This is not what it was like when I was in high school. Stuff like that. That's what it's like to be a nonfiction writer. I get curious about stuff, and then I try to understand it, and then I try to explain it. I try to convey why it matters in this life of ours. It's a great, great job. I highly recommend it. And for me, it really started here at Wyoming High School in the 10th grade when the principal, Bob Yearout, who was a very good guy, did something really dumb. Mr. Yearout was fed up with misbehavior, so he announced suddenly one day that no one could utter a word in study hall. Total silence. No working together, no asking other students questions about homework, no chit-chat to let off a little steam between classes. Nothing. It's pretty absurd. So I decided I would write about it. I wrote an editorial for The Horizon, the newspaper. I'm really glad to see that's still around. And I discovered two amazing things. First, I discovered that writing can be a way of figuring out what my own thoughts are. It helped me clarify things for myself. Second, I discovered that when I chose my words carefully, when I got my facts right, when I used logic and reason, when I edited carefully for clarity, I could influence how other people thought. People read my essay. They commented on it. It made a difference. I remember seeing Mr. Yearout in the hallways after it was published, and he said, I was so nervous when I saw him because I had criticized him in this article. He said, that was a great article you wrote. Even the guy I was criticizing was complimenting me. The silent study hall did not last very long. That was the day I became interested in nonfiction writing and storytelling. Not long after that, my friend John Holzman clued me into an incredible nonfiction book about Alaska called Coming into the Country by John McPhee. The writing was beautiful, the stories were beautiful, the research was incredible. McPhee visited wondrous places, sifted through tons of facts and highlighted the most interesting ones, talked to fascinating experts. He explained how stuff worked. He did his most creative best to tell the people the whole truth about something. The whole truth. I was like, someone can do this and that's a job? They get paid? And my dad was like, well, they don't get paid much. But I was like, but they get paid some? So, off and running. Blue speech. This speech is called The 3 Worst Things I Did in High School. Counting down. Here's the 3rd worst thing I did in high school. I forged. I forged a lot. Well, I didn't actually forge. I wasn't the forger. My friend Steve Lovely was the actual forger. But I was complicit. I would have forged. I would have very gladly forged if I could, but I was bad at it. Steve was good at it. This was connected to the study hall problem. Study hall was terrible. We couldn't talk. So Steve had an idea. We hatched an idea. Steve started forging the signature of Dave Schaefer, our orchestra leader, in order to get us out of study hall. Totally worked. You could not tell the difference between Dave Schaefer's signature and Steve's forgery. We went wherever we wanted. We talked and we walked, and while the study hall kids sat there silently, we just did whatever we wanted. It was awesome. We may have done this for a little while even after the study hall rule was lifted. So I have less of a defense there. But Steve moved away. Very sad for me. And after that, I instantly became a better school citizen because I wasn't a good forger. And I had to be like the rest of them, just back in normal old boring study hall. Okay, red speech. I like that. So I decided I wanted to be a journalist and a nonfiction writer. And I went to a fancy college, and mainly that was so I could brag about going to a fancy college. And I've been super lucky, and you heard all the things I've been lucky enough to do, publish in all those great publications. And by the way, truly, my 2 younger brothers should be up here with me, or they just as could have or should have gotten this award. John, my brother, he was actually here. He's got a camera in his hand. I thought there would be lights on to be able to see him. There he is over there. John has made a number of very important films that have changed the world that we live in. His most recent is that he got to work with Al Gore directly to make the sequel to An Inconvenient Truth. So I may be getting this very, very nice award, but John one day is going to walk up and accept an Oscar, so he'll be all right. And my brother Josh, that real little pipsqueak in that picture that we showed, has gone on to write an incredible book about Abraham Lincoln. He edits a very important magazine called The Believer, and he runs a writing center in Nevada, so really, really amazing stuff. But I got the award, so I'm up here, back to me. So I wrote a book called The Forgetting. I wrote a book called Data Smog. I got to publish in the Washington Post, New York Times, and all that stuff. It's all bragging. I was on 60 Minutes actually years ago. I was on the Today Show. I was on the PBS NewsHour, et cetera, et cetera. The point of this bragging is I wanted to convey what really is my serious point today at the beginning of it, which is that when you hear about the mainstream media, or they call it the lamestream media, that's me. I'm a part of that group. I'm a part of the media elite, the thing that people so often deride and criticize. People today call us the fake news. They call us, the president called us the enemy of the people. They're talking about me. They're talking about people I know and respect, who I think are some of the smartest and most productive people in the world. You know what the media elite is for real? It's a bunch of truth nerds. People like me and far smarter than me who care about getting facts right and explaining. We do this because we're just curious nerds, but what we do is actually really important. So from now on, when you hear the words media elite, I want you to think about truth nerds. Just people like me. Walter Cronkite was a truth nerd. He helped stop the Vietnam War, which was based on some pretty big lies. Edward R. Murrow was a truth nerd. He helped stop the demagogue Joe McCarthy from his highly destructive Red Scare. Woodward and Bernstein were truth nerds. They exposed the lies and crimes of President Nixon, who then had to resign in disgrace. Also, all the famous scientists you've ever heard of were just truth nerds. Every one of them. Every rocket sent into outer space was built by a truth nerd. The internet, the iPhone in your pocket, was created by people who were just truth nerds in high school and went on and kept that in their heads. The Eiffel Tower pyramids were designed and built by truth nerds. Clean water, safe cars, the Fender Stratocaster, the US Constitution, all created by people who wanted to get things right. That's what they cared about. They paid attention to detail. They looked hard to discover mistakes. They were making so they could admit them to themselves, and then they could fix them. Almost everything good in the world comes from people who cherish truth and clarity and want to carefully pass that on. That's what teachers here do. They're truth nerds, just like me, just like all those people. That's why this school is so great. That's why you're given all these amazing opportunities. And believe me, there are not many schools that are anything close to this caliber. That's why my parents brought me to Wyoming when I was 3 years old, which was already famous for its school system, because they had teachers who cared, administrators who cared, all just a bunch of truth nerds wanting to get stuff right. They cared about accuracy and clarity. They're people who make mistakes all the time, but admit those mistakes and then work to fix them. Okay, back to the blue speech. The second worst thing I ever did in high school. I raided the Gauls. This was Latin class with Mrs. Listerman. She was very nice, but she was too nice. She let us get away with anything, and you can't send that kind of signal to kids in high school or they will run amok. With no discipline at all, they will behave like apes. You guys know that. You're no better than apes when you're not being disciplined, admit it. Or worse than apes. So we're in Latin class, and right across the hall there's a French class going on at the same time as our Latin class, and we call them the Gauls. They had a discipline teacher, Madam something or other. She kept her kids in line, but Mrs. Listerman, she wouldn't keep us in line. So we had this other thing in class. We had all these catapults that we built. I don't know if that still happens. We had a shelf full of catapults, and Mrs. Listerman let them stay up on the shelf the entire year. And so every day we'd come in and we'd see these catapults, and they would just be calling out to us. So here's what Latin class was for me almost every day. Someone would sit down and start translating this kind of slow, boring Latin, which is just the most boring thing in the world when you're a teenager. I'm sorry. And someone else in the class, and very often it was Todd Seiler's older brother, Steve Seiler, my good friend. We'd be sitting there listening to someone translate, and Steve would go, raid the gulls. And then I would look over and I would see him and I would start chanting, raid the gulls, raid the gulls. We'd have 20 people in the class, and in 3 minutes we'd have 19 of the 20 people, except for the person who was translating, all chanting, raid the gulls! And we'd stand up on the desks, and we'd shake our fists, and we'd run over and we'd grab the catapults. This actually happened. And Mrs. Listerman would be standing there and she would be quietly saying, this is not a great time to raid the gulls. Really, we should be translating. But we're already like apes, running around, and we've got the catapults, we have the chalk, we run out of the hallway, and we're shooting the chalk at the French kids who can't get up from their desks because they're disciplined, probably. Total mayhem for 10 minutes. I mean, honestly, someone should have come in there with a taser and just like flattened us. It was brutal. It was a prison break. It was a prison break. It was not good. It was not good. I'm ashamed. But now it's funny. I get to look back 30 years. It's funny. All right. I told you I had to lighten up. Now we're back to the written speech. So here's a part of the speech where I explain why I feel like I have to give this speech, honestly. In the years that I've been a truth nerd, something truly terrible has happened. People are lying more than they used to. And they're getting away with lies. We are not in the information age anymore. Right now, as great as this information age is with all these amazing tools, right now we are in the disinformation age. Of course, liars have always existed. As long as people have been fighting for food or property or to win over someone's affections, people have lied. But something has changed. Something has changed in this country and in this world. And we've seen it happen. It has to do with these amazing new devices that are in our pockets. It is actually getting easier to lie and confuse people. We're also connected and bombarded by information. And the connecting is good, but we're also connected and bombarded with information that it's actually getting harder to figure out what's true. That is a really dangerous place to be. Now, everyone here knows what happened in the 2016 election. Russia, our adversary, waged an information war on us. It wasn't a hot war. It wasn't a cold war. It was an information war. They turned information into a weapon. They made up people, they made up facts, they made up scary stories. And it wasn't just to elect a certain person. Their main objective was not to elect a certain person. It was to confuse us all. It was to turn us against ourselves. It was to interfere with the best thing this country does, which is we're a bunch of truth nerds who try to get stuff right and build good things, and that's how freedom exists. And it's not just Russia that's doing this. In our country, people are lying through their teeth about really important stuff. These people are the opposite of truth nerds. There is no other way to say it. They are greedy, lying liars. From Liarville, I'll say that. They not only don't respect the truth, which is bad enough, they not only don't respect clarity, they like confusion. They get more powerful and richer when people get confused. There are people in this world that are on the other side of this value. And I'm going to tell you about a great example of this. It's the best example I know, but there's a bunch of examples. But this is a really big one. Climate change. Great example. My brother John made this very important documentary. He actually made two really important documentaries about climate change. Climate change is real. I hope you know that. I desperately hope you know that. Truth nerds, scientists and journalists and academics and anyone who pays attention, they have known about climate change for a long, long time. And every year, for the last 20 years, it's just been more and more apparent that this is real, and this is something that's going to affect not only our country, but the entire world, the planet, and is going to change everything about the way we live. The planet is getting warmer. The oceans are going to rise a lot over the next century. Weather patterns are going to be radically disrupted. We started to see that, but it's nothing compared to what's going to happen. And if it sounds like science fiction, watch my brother's film. It's real. It's going to happen. Science is real. Science can tell us what's out there and what's going to happen. And as scary as it is, we need to prepare for these things. Millions of people, tens of millions of people, will be turned into desperate refugees across the world. And that's going to affect the politics and the culture and the economics of everything that we live in. While you live and while your kids live, all these things are going to happen. And it's going to be one of the biggest struggles we face. In the US Senate right now, there are 100 senators. 38 of them are climate change deniers. They would rather not believe in science. In the US House of Representatives, there are 435 members. 142 of them are climate change deniers. Even now, we absolutely know how real this is. They don't want to face the truth. In the White House, I told you didn't want to hear this speech. In the White House, our one president is a climate change denier. This is supposed to be the age of information. This is supposed to be the age where we embrace truth and we build on it like all of our ancestors have. But that's not what's going on with climate change. All right, that was pretty heavy stuff. Back to the blue speech. Need a break. And I'm almost done. Because obviously we're down to the worst thing I did in high school. And it's not funny at all, really, but it happened, and I'm a truth nerd, so I'm here to admit it. I cheated. I cheated in high school. Yeah. Not a lot. I mostly did what they said I did, but I cheated in Latin class. The Latin class I've already talked to you about. And I can blame it on Mrs. List. I can blame it on Steve Seiler. I'll blame it on Steve Seiler. But whatever. I'm the person who cheated along with others. And when Mrs. Listerman wasn't looking, I glanced over and I copied some stuff off of Matt Kanner's test, which was basically like copying stuff off of the teacher's copy because Matt Kanner never, ever, fact machine. That was the great thing about being friends with Matt Kanner. He always got stuff right. He also had a hot tub. There were a number of things about being friends with him. And of course, I am terribly ashamed of that. I'm not proud of that. It's not a joke that I cheated, but I started this list and I had to get to the actual most serious thing. The point of me telling you this is that that's also what truth nerds do. We admit our mistakes, first to ourselves and then to everyone else. And we bare our truth souls, and sometimes we ask for forgiveness, but we look back and we look back at the things we did in our lives or the things we did 10 minutes ago. Because we all make mistakes and we all do things we're not proud of. But the truth nerds, like your teachers and your parents and the scientists and the journalists and all the people that you admire, they look at their mistakes and they admit them to themselves and their colleagues and their friends, and they move on. They move on and they try not to make that same mistake again. Which leads me to the purple speech, where the two speeches come back together. I don't know if this is a yay or an oh. We can kind of, yay. So we're almost done here. Everyone, those are good awe and joyful. I like the. All right. So everyone makes mistakes. Everyone makes bad choices. Everyone gets ashamed. Sometimes at the moment, honestly, you can't tell the difference between good and bad. And you make the wrong choice. You're tempted to do something and it seems like the right thing to do, and you look back an hour later or a year later or 30 years later and you're like, well, that was dumb. Being a truth nerd is not about getting things right all the time. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being this perfectly angelic, perfectly good, virtuous person. Being a truth nerd is a philosophy about what you want your life to be like, what you want your culture to be like, what you want your country to be like, what you want this world to be like. If you embrace truth-seeking and clarity as an ideal, that becomes a way of life for you. An effort to constantly right the ship, to own up to your mistakes, to seek the truth, even if it is often more difficult and sometimes more embarrassing. Truth nerds spend almost as much time correcting their mistakes and acknowledging their mistakes as they do looking for the new and correct facts. We're all sitting here today in this great auditorium, in this great high school, in this great city, in this great country, in this world, which is astonishing. All these amazing tools and all these great medicines and all these just amazing things that we have in our society. We're all sitting here today because millions of people have embraced that ideal, acknowledging your mistakes and trying to build from them and seek the truth going forward. And I want to be clear, I've said some quasi-political things here today. This is not about left or right. This is not about Democrat or Republican. I know plenty of truth nerds. There are gobs and gobs of truth nerds on both sides of the political aisle. This is about lying and not lying. It's about being honestly curious, or just being a greedy liar from Liarville. Every one of you has a choice to make. You don't think about this every day when you're going about your lives and you're doing your homework and you're having fun with your friends, and that's fine. But as you leave this place, and even now, you have a choice, a big choice to make. And you ought to think about it every once in a while. You can be a truth nerd, or you can be a distortioner, a disinformationist. And I'll tell you right now, you can be a greedy disinformation distortionist, and you can make lots of money. You can get your own jet plane, and you can be powerful, and your life will be great. You can have a bunch of houses and swimming pools and all that stuff. You can do that. But I hope you'll make the other choice. I hope that you will do what your teachers have decided to do, and probably everyone else that you respect in your life, and that you will celebrate science and fact gathering, and you will make your life by what you give. Make the world a better place and be a truth nerd. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Since you guys have the energy, I didn't know if we were going to try this, but I have to do this. And my brother John's videotaping it so I can send it to Steve Seiler, God's brother. And we never got to do this with this level, so this is my personal point of privilege, my prerogative. I've got all you in the room. Let's start out real slow, like a whisper, and then let's build it. And you're gonna enjoy it. You're not going to do it in Latin class, but you're going to enjoy it here. It's going to start. So. Raid the calls. 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 I'll never get to do that again.
On behalf of the foundation, the students, teachers, and administration and Board of Education and other guests here today, we want to congratulate you on your remarkable achievements and named the 2018 Distinguished Alumnus and a Truth Nerd. Thank you.
we are, not only at DShenk, but also the foundation and all that they do for Wyoming City Schools. And with that said, students, you are going to report to second bell, and we will see you a little bit later in class panels. So have a great morning.